Bible prophecy is active and unfolding daily. Zechariah 12, Isaiah 17, Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38. Here is what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Shalom, my friends. Welcome to this week's newscast. From CNN, United States defense officials believe the threat of militant attacks in northern Sinai is growing. And while some 700 U.S. troops are currently stationed in Sinai to support the Israel-Egypt peace treaty, the Obama administration is considering pulling troops out of the North Camp base at El Gorah in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, in part due to the growing threat from ISIS. From Der Spiegel, Germany, the recent attacks in Brussels show that ISIS has built up a sophisticated network of terrorists that goes well beyond al-Qaeda's capabilities. It is now able to strike using sleepers who have not yet been identified by security officials. Testimony from deserters suggests the terror organization began establishing sleeper cells in multiple European countries early on, in Turkey in particular. Further, a new sanctuary for ISIS fighters, planners, and recruiters has been established in the middle of Europe. In some remote Bosnian villages, the black flag of ISIS is flown, and as a share of the population, more fighters from Bosnia-Herzegovina have joined ISIS than from any other country in Europe, except for Belgium. From Haaretz, on the Syrian part of Mount Hermon, there is no longer any trace of the Syrian army. The last Syrian commandos abandoned their outposts last winter, and there are now almost no locations along the Israeli-Syrian border on the Golan Heights where Israeli and Syrian soldiers are facing each other, except for a weak Syrian presence at Quneitra. More than a month after a ceasefire was declared in the Syrian civil war, Israel's assessment that it would collapse is starting to be actualized, albeit much more slowly than first anticipated, as fighting has resumed in various parts of the country. The fact that the ceasefire does not include the Nusra Front and ISIS allows the Assad regime and the Russian Air Force to attack them, and ISIS is having difficulty holding the large territory on which it declared its Islamic caliphate, especially in Syria. Its attackers include the United States, Russia, the European Union states, Turkey, the Assad regime, and numerous Arab states and rebel groups, including Kurdish factions. The coalitions attacking ISIS have complete aerial superiority, and the terror attacks ISIS committed or inspired in Paris, Brussels, California, and Sinai have only served to intensify hostility towards ISIS. From Stratfor, satellite imagery shows that Hezbollah has built up a significant base near the Syrian town of Qusair and has dug tunnels from the base in Syria back to Lebanon. According to one source close to Hezbollah, the group intends to stockpile Katyusha rockets, mortars, and howitzers at the base, and plans to move some of its 60 T-72 main battle tanks there. Additionally, there are 4 separate munitions factories at the base. At the same time, according to an Iranian diplomatic source, ranking officers from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, treat the base as an Iranian asset. Sources have also said there are long-range missiles at Qusair, referring specifically to Iranian missiles, including the Shahab-1, Shahab-2, and Fateh 110, any of which could be used to strike Israel. Now, in my newscast from March 29th, 2 weeks ago, I reported on the plans to erect replicas of the 48-foot-tall arch that stood in front of the Temple of Baal in Palmyra, Syria. Plans to erect these replicas simultaneously in Times Square in New York City, as well as Trafalgar Square in London during the month of April. The New York Times, Snopes, and a whole host of other mainstream news sources reported last month that everything was on track for these reproductions to be built and put in place. However, now that will not be happening. The only arch that will be going up will be in Trafalgar Square, and it won't be the one from the Temple of Baal. Instead, the Institute for Digital Archaeology has changed its plans and will be putting up a reproduction of the Arch of Triumph, which the Romans originally built in Palmyra, and which has nothing to do with Baal. Now, an article from the Telegraph, which is one of the most important news sources in the United Kingdom, reported last Friday that the original plan to put up the arch from the Temple of Baal in New York and London simultaneously had been scrapped. Quote, when the IDA revealed last December that it was intending to use its data and expertise to build not one but 2 replica Palmyra arches to be unveiled simultaneously in Trafalgar Square in London and Times Square in New York, it generated headlines across the world. Since then, there has been some backtracking on the original idea. There will be no simultaneous unveiling in New York. They may transport the London Arch there later or build another one. And the Palmyra Arch that is being reconstructed is no longer the entrance to the Temple of Baal, which survived an attempt to blow it up in August 2015, but the Arch of Triumph, partially destroyed in October, formerly located at one end of the Great Colonnade. Close quote. So why has there been such a dramatic and sudden change in plans? Since the original New York Times story of last month, a massive firestorm has erupted in the alternative media, and this story has gone viral all over the internet. Perhaps that, along with, I imagine, tens of thousands of powerful prayers from righteous believers, has turned the tide. Hallelujah. Let's praise Elohim for this victory. But let's also not kid ourselves. America continues to embrace and esteem the ways of Baal as a nation. And the grave judgments that this country is facing is not likely to change without a real revival of repentance. Since Roe versus Wade was decided in 1973, more than 58 million babies have been murdered in America, a key element of Baal worship. Look at Yirmiyahu, that's Jeremiah, chapter 10, verses 4, 5, and 6. And another form of Baal worship which we see being lifted up is the public exhibition of sexual acts. In ancient times, there were bisexual orgies around the altars of Baal, and large crowds would gather around to watch. Now today, many are absolutely addicted to watching other people having sex. It's estimated that 68% of all Christian men watch pornography on a regular basis. Turning to wars and rumors of wars. On Wednesday, April 6th, from the Jerusalem Post, Israel warned Europe that hundreds of jihadists are planning to strike. Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon told his Polish counterpart Antoni Macierewicz in Tel Aviv on Wednesday, quote, "There are hundreds of jihadists planning to strike Western targets on European soil who are already present on the continent. We are concerned that what we saw in Paris and Brussels is just the start, and that attempts to carry out terrorist attacks in Europe will continue." Close quote. From Tasnim, Iran, a factory was opened in Tehran for the mass production of HMX, that is, octogen explosives, which are used to increase the efficiency of missiles. Octogen is a powerful high explosive used almost exclusively in military applications, including as a solid rocket propellant. From the Times of Oman, the Syrian army and its allies launched a major attack on insurgents south of Aleppo, described as the fiercest government assault in the area since an agreement to ease the fighting came into effect in February. Fighting south of Aleppo in recent days has put further strain on the already widely violated ceasefire deal brokered by the United States and Russia, with the aim of launching a diplomatic process towards ending the 5-year-long war. On Thursday, April 7th, from Haaretz, the Palestinian Authority distributed a draft resolution to a number of members of the UN Security Council, condemning construction in the settlements, according to Western diplomats and senior Palestinian officials. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas would like to bring the resolution to a vote in 2 weeks. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the proposal on Thursday, saying that it would make peace less likely, not more likely. Then on Friday, April 8th, from Press TV, several Iraqi policemen claimed to have seen U.S. aircraft dropping weapons and munitions for Daesh, that is ISIS, terrorists, in a region west of the Anbar province in Iraq. In a video posted on Iraq's Al-Ma'aluma news website, they are purportedly heard saying that the American plane had also jammed their communication devices in the Hadissa Island district. One of the policemen said they had seen a military vehicle of Daesh, ISIS, arriving in the region a few minutes later and transferring the weapons to a place the group controlled. From the Egyptian streets, as the Saudi king commenced his first official visit to Egypt, ISIS-affiliated militants launched an attack in the North Sinai region, killing 7 people and wounding 15. The deaths occurred after 2 armored personnel carriers were targeted by explosive devices planted on the side of the road in Rafah and Sheikh Zayed. And despite local media reporting the incidents, Egypt's military has yet to release an official statement. On Saturday, April 9th, from Ynet News, Syrian government forces and their allies battled insurgents, including al-Qaeda fighters, in fierce clashes south of Aleppo late on Saturday, and the rebels advanced, taking over 2 hilltops. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights director said that this could mark a breakdown in the area of a fragile cessation of hostilities agreement, which has been in place for several weeks and slowed fighting, but has not halted it. Turning to our Intifada update, we are currently seeing a significant decrease in the number of Palestinian terrorist attacks. However, rock throwing and firebombs do continue. On Thursday, April 7th, from the Jerusalem Post, Israeli security forces arrested a number of Palestinian residents in the West Bank for throwing stones and firebombs at cars on Route 443, north of Jerusalem. Then from Israel's Channel 10, a 22-year-old resident of a Palestinian village in East Jerusalem was charged on Thursday for planning a shooting attack on security forces near Jerusalem's Malha Mall shopping center. He was arrested close to the mall. From the Times of Israel, charges were also brought against 3 Palestinians from the West Bank village of Dir Abu Mishal for using laser beams to try to blind drivers on Route 465 near the Jewish community of Halamish, north of Ramallah. Then on Friday, April 8th, from the Times of Israel, a bomb was detonated near an IDF bulldozer on the northern Gaza border, causing no damage or injuries. On Saturday, April 9th, from the Jerusalem Post, Palestinian security forces arrested 3 Palestinians after finding grenades, guns, and an M16 semi-automatic rifle in their backpacks. The 3 were on their way to carry out a shooting attack against Israeli targets. On Sunday, April 10th, from I-24 News, 3 Palestinians were killed in the collapse of a tunnel between Rafah in Gaza and Egypt. And turning to our review of last week's news, the threat of militant attacks in northern Sinai is growing. Recent attacks in Brussels show that ISIS has built up a sophisticated network of terrorists that goes well beyond al-Qaeda's capabilities. A new sanctuary for ISIS fighters, planners, and recruiters has been established in the middle of Europe. Israel's assessment that the Syrian civil war would collapse is starting to be actualized. Satellite imagery reveals that Hezbollah has built up a significant base near the Syrian town of Qusair and has dug tunnels from that base in Syria back to Lebanon. Israel is warning Europe that hundreds of jihadists are planning to strike. An Iranian factory was opened in Tehran for the mass production of HMX, that is, octogen explosives. A bomb was detonated near an IDF bulldozer on the northern Gaza border. U.S. aircraft were seen dropping weapons and munitions for ISIS terrorists in a region west of the Anbar province in Iraq. Syrian government forces and their allies battled insurgents, including al-Qaeda fighters, in fierce clashes south of Aleppo. ISIS-affiliated militants launched an attack in the North Sinai region, killing 7 people and wounding 15. The Syrian army and its allies launched a major attack on insurgents, again, south of Aleppo. Palestinian security forces arrested 3 Palestinians after finding grenades, guns, and an M16 semi-automatic rifle in their backpacks. 3 Palestinians were killed in the collapse of a tunnel between Rafah and Gaza and Egypt. And although we are currently seeing a significant decrease in the number of Palestinian terrorist attacks, failed attempts for shooting attacks, rock throwing, and firebombs continue, and now laser beams are being used to blind drivers on highways. And that, my friends, is what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Abba willing, I'll see you here once again next week. Until then, stay safe. Shalom. everything I consume. Enough is time alone with you, underneath the naked moon, sharing confidential moods and making chatter. Mockingbird nocturnal sings notations of eternal things, entering the quantum breeze, flying not for want of wings. He lights his gaze on you and me, simply because we matter.